9 days to go before America decides on a choice for president. An election that we certainly hope goes far more smoothly than the disputed election of 1876. Mo Rocca takes us back.
1876 was a banner year for America, the 100th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. A nationwide celebration with a full fifth of the country's population descending on Philadelphia for the Centennial Exposition. But beneath the revelry, there was a deep sense of unease.
This was the depths of a pretty serious economic depression. There was widespread unemployment. There were fairly violent labor disputes going on in various parts of the country.
And, says Columbia University history professor Eric Foner, the country was still feeling the aftershocks of the Civil War, which had ended only 11 years before.
There was still violence in the South, which had existed since the Civil War because of white supremacists' opposition to the giving of citizenship rights to the former slaves. So it was not a tranquil year, that's for sure.
1876 was also a presidential election year, and all of these issues, plus the rampant corruption in the administration of outgoing President Ulysses S. Grant, would factor into the contest. The Republicans ran Ohio Governor Rutherford B. Hayes. Was he charismatic?
I wouldn't say so.
This is a spectacular porch.
Yeah, Hayes joked that he wanted a porch with a house attached.
Dustin McLaughlin is the historian at the Rutherford B. Hayes Presidential Center in Fremont, Ohio.
He really exemplified that American tradition of the office seeks you, you don't seek it.
We have kind of the trifecta over here. We have General Grant, General Sherman, General Sheridan.
All great Union generals.
Yes, and all from Ohio as well.
Hayes' service as a general during the Civil War, says the center's executive director Christy Weininger, was central to his identity.
He saw firsthand the passions that were behind the sectionalism that caused the Civil War. So I think that was always in the back of his mind, is how do we make this country feel united again?
Meanwhile, the Democrats were hungry to reclaim the White House, which they hadn't won in 20 years. Their candidate, New York Governor Samuel Tilden, a bachelor lawyer, had made his name fighting big city corruption.
Tilden and Hendricks, with Tilden and Hendricks, go wrong for Tilden and Hendricks.
The man was a bit lethargic, and quite frankly, a lot of people thought he was dull. Dull but dedicated.
His home sat across from New York City's Gramercy Park and is today the National Arts Club, overseen by Robert Yonner.
I have to tell you, this house is kind of nicer than the White House. This house is a great Tilden legacy.
While both had beautiful homes, neither candidate, says Eric Foner, was exactly Mount Rushmore material.
There's another way of putting it. Both of them were basically mediocrities, politically.
Still, the turnout that November 7th remains the highest ever for a presidential election.
The turnout was 82% of eligible voters. That's extraordinary.
You had two political parties competing throughout the nation with people very loyal to them.
On election night, Tilden was ahead in the popular vote by 260,000 votes.
Hayes actually goes to bed believing Tilden had won, and he actually has interviews with reporters saying, I have lost. The Republican Party has to step in and tell him to stop saying that.
That's because Republican officials still saw a narrow path to victory for Hayes.
If Hayes could carry the three southern states where the results were not yet clear, Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina, he would win by one electoral vote. And they just issued a statement. Hayes has carried those states and is elected. And in a certain sense, It's almost like the 2000 election where Bush made an early claim of victory, even though it was so divided, and Gore never quite contested it properly.
And just as in the year 2000, America in 1876 woke up the morning after the election not knowing who had won. Inauguration back then was in early March, which meant the country had 4 months to figure out who would be its 19th president.
This election was flawed from top to bottom.
Massive voter fraud, says Foner, only added to the confusion.
There was violence throughout the South against African American voters to try to make it impossible for them to vote.
Black men, almost all of